All right. Revelation chapter 17. So I'm going to... So Revelation chapter 17, we actually looked at a lot of the verses from Revelation chapter 17, starting in verse 7, when we were talking about the beast that we were introduced to in chapter 12, because the beast... Actually, I think it was from chapter 13, because the beast is the Antichrist, and those verses in chapter 17, starting in verse 7, give a lot of the explanation of who the Antichrist was. And so we looked at a lot of those verses back then. So some of it I'll repeat, some of it I won't repeat, some of it we just talked about it before. And I won't. The main thing we want to talk about tonight is this scarlet woman. So there's this woman that he sees in this vision. So let me just read the first 6 verses. He says, "Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came, and he talked with me, saying to me, 'Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication.' So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement." So I have a lot of stuff that's just kind of jumbled around, and that I want to talk about. So this woman, of course, she's sitting on this beast, and the beast that she's sitting on has the 7 heads and the 10 crowns. It's the exact description of the beast in chapter 13, who we've already affirmed was the Antichrist, or the sign of the Antichrist. And in verses 7 and following is the sign of the Antichrist. So she is sitting, it says 2 things about her. One, in verse 1, it says the great harlot who sits on many waters. And then it also says that in verse 3 that he saw her sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So on the one hand, it says that she was sitting on many waters. See, I don't even know where to start. Let me just tell you up front what she represents. She represents the end time religious system of the day. She represents some sort of worldwide religion that is going to take hold for the first 3.5 years, for the first half of the tribulation. And all of the nations are going to use her for the first 3.5 years. And at the end of the 3.5 years, the Antichrist is going to decide it's time for him to declare himself as God. And we'll see this in a minute. They will use her as long as they need her. I keep saying her. They will use this religion as long as they need it. And then when they are done with it, they will simply destroy it. And we're going to actually see that here in this chapter. So she represents the end time religious system. And so, you get this, he keeps calling her a harlot. Well, all through the Bible, all through the Old Testament, anytime, well, let me just read a verse. I have a verse picked out. It's Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 6. I am so far, I'm not even following. I mean, it's like I said, I don't even know what order to present all that. I just have so much stuff written down. This is just one verse, and it's just representative of many, many, many verses throughout the Old Testament. Jeremiah 3:6 says this, "The Lord said also to me in the days of Josiah the king, have you seen what backsliding Israel has done? She has gone up on every high mountain and under every green tree, and there played the harlot." So whenever Israel has committed some sort of idolatry, it is equated with harlotry. Of course, you know, the book of Hosea, the whole story of Hosea, you remember God says you're going to marry a harlot, and then she's going to leave you, and you're going to go and you're going to buy her back. And you know, the whole story was about this harlotry, and it's what Israel had done. And every time people turn their back upon God and commit some sort of idolatry or some sort of religious idolatry and rejecting God and choosing something else, in the Old Testament, really in the entire Bible, it is equated with harlotry. That's the way God sees it. He sees it as this ultimate unfaithfulness. And so it's all through the Old Testament. Even her sin here, it says that she's got this cup and it has the fornication. Even her sin is called the fornication. So she represents this old-time religion, she represents an end-time religious system that will come into play, that will be used to galvanize all the political leaders and actually galvanize all of the people to follow. And but it will be idolatrous in some way. I'm going to tell you some very interesting things here in just a minute. I'm trying to figure out where I want to do that. So he says, verse 2, he says, the kings of the earth have committed fornication. The inhabitants of the earth were... Wait, I need to back up. Because I was saying she sat on the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns. That's the Antichrist. So she's sitting on the Antichrist. It also says in verse 1 that she sits on many waters. So there is a verse, verse 15 of chapter 17. It says, and he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So this is going to be a worldwide religion. Peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. It's not going to be just one specific race or one specific geographic location. This is going to be a complete worldwide religion that is going to rise up and become extremely popular. So she's going to be on the back of the Antichrist. He's going to use her. He's going to carry her. He's going to use her until he's done with her. The kings of the earth, it says the kings of the earth are going to commit fornication with her in verse 2. And the inhabitants of the earth are made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So they're all going to buy into it. Everybody is going to buy into whatever this religious system is. Everybody is going to buy into it. And everybody is going to fall into line with it. And so he carried me away in the spirit, and I saw the woman sitting on the scarlet beast, which was full of blasphemy, having 7 heads, 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. So all of this, how she's arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones, when she is at her peak, she is going to be a very, I keep saying she, you understand I'm talking about a religion though, right? Not just a person. It's going to be a very, it's going to be a rich religion. It's going to be, it's describing her, whoever the leaders of this religious system are going to be wealthy, I believe. You know, that's the way it's describing her. She's going to, again, all of the kings of the earth, at least in the beginning, are going to be a part of her. They're going to buy into it. All the people of the world are going to buy into it. And so it's going to be a very opulent and a very, I'm looking for a word and I can't find it. I'm looking for a word other than rich, but it's going to be, it's going to be rich. There's going to be a lot of riches. That's the way she's dressing with the gold and the precious stones and all of that. On her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. So she's going to have a lot of power, rich and extravagant. She has this cup, it says, with the blood of the martyrs. She is going to kill Christians. One of the things about this end time religion is they are going to kill Christians. You know, it's interesting that Jesus will say at one point that there's going to come a time when they will kill you, and they will say that they're doing it in the name of God. And, you know, I've told you often that everything in the end time, Satan seems to mimic or wants to mimic Christ. This end time religion, I'm just going to say this. It's going to be similar to Christianity. It really is. But ultimately, it's going to be idolatry. Listen to this. So he calls her Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. So this was a little interesting when I went into this thing. He calls her Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of all harlots. In other words, so Babylon, I don't even know how, I know where I want to go, I don't know how to get there. So starting in Genesis chapter 10, Genesis chapter 10 and 11, there's a guy named Nimrod who is a descendant of Noah. He's one of Ham's sons, I believe. And so you remember that after the flood, the boys were sent out, and God said, I want you to go out into all the earth, and I want you to travel the earth, and I want you to replenish the earth. So Nimrod and his clan, or his group of people, they found a place in the plain, and they decided, you know what, we don't want to go anywhere. We want to stay right here. And in 10 and 11, they said, you know what, we need to build us great cities. And not only that, but we need to build a great religious system. Now I'm kind of giving you explanation and not just the words. But we also need to build this great religious system. So that's when they began to build this tower that would reach up into the heavens. And so we know this as the Tower of Babel. So you know the story that they were building this tower, and God said, you know, first of all, they were supposed to be replenishing the earth, not huddling up and building this. They weren't supposed to be building a religious system, and they did it. And so God confounded their language. So we call it Babel, and we equate the word Babel with confusion, right? But you know what Babel really means in that old Hebrew word, Babel? In fact, I'll tell you this. Whenever you see a word in the Old Testament, and it has E-L at the end of it, or even at the beginning of it, that E-L means Elohim, which is a word for what? God. Just like Israel, Joel, all of those names that have E-L in it, it has something, their name means something with God. Babel actually means the gate to God. It actually means the gateway to God. Now, because of the story, we equate it and we think it means confusion, but it doesn't mean confusion at all. It means the gateway to God. So what happens now is that Babel eventually gives rise to Babylon, right? The great kingdom of Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar. And so what happens is that Babylon, with its origins in Babel, represents actually the end time kingdom that is going to arise at the end. And it represents the religious system, the anti-God religious system that is going to arise with it. And that's why he says she's the mother of harlots, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Everything that Babylon represented back then is going to come to its ultimate fulfillment and ultimate fruition in this final end time kingdom. So when I was studying this, actually, I think it was last week, and I was just kind of trying to get ahead a little bit. And I looked at something, and there was something that said that in Babylon, they had this religion that was centered around a woman and a child. And so when I was studying it this week, so listen, look, you just got to, this is not in the Bible, all right? This is just from study. So the legend is that Nimrod had a lady that he was going to marry. She actually does become his wife. Her name is Semiramis. There you go. Semiramis. That's exactly it. Her name is Semiramis. And she gets pregnant. And she actually says that the pregnancy is from a sunlight beam that shined upon her, that it wasn't from, a natural conception. And so she gives birth to a little boy named Tammuz. And the legend says that one day Tammuz was gored by a bull in the field, and that he died, and she cried and wept over him for 40 days, and 40 days later he came back alive. And so this woman and this child, and this woman who has an unnatural conception, has this child, becomes the center for this religious system in Babylon. And so this is one of the reasons that I'm saying that this end-time religious system is going to, in some ways, mimic Christianity, but it's going to be idolatry. It's going to be false, and it's going to be fake. But so as I studied, this religious system of the mother and the child actually is in all of those cultures. Phoenicia had what they called, the lady was called Ashtoreth, and her son was called Baal, who we understand Baal's in the Bible. In Egypt, you had Isis, and her son was Osiris. All right. In Greece, you had Aphrodite, and her son was Eros. All right. And in Rome, you had Venus was the mother, and her son was Cupid. And so all of these ancient religious systems centered around a mother and a child. And I'm thinking the end time religious system is going to do the same thing. It's going to center around a mother and a child. Of course, Christianity centers around a mother and a child with Mary and baby Jesus. Mostly male children? They were all male children. All the ones that the religions center around are male children, yes. But I thought that was really, I had never run across that before. I just thought it was kind of interesting. Let's see where I want to go from here. Semiramis, I'm surprised you knew that. Actually, I'm not surprised you knew that. So in verse 6, so this religion is going to persecute Christians. It's going to kill those who follow Jesus. So let me move on down right quick to... It seemed like there was something else I wanted to say up in there, but I don't see it in my notes. And the problem is I haven't gone exactly by my notes. So anyhow, this end time is going to find its fulfillment. This whole religious system, everything that Babylon represented is going to find its fulfillment in the end time. And you understand that the end time Antichrist kingdom, it's going to be religious, it's also going to be economic, and it's also going to be military. I mean, it's going to be it's going to be an entire system that people are going to buy into. So, let's see. So verse 10, verse 9. We actually went over this when we went over the Antichrist. So this is the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And he said, and here's the mind which has wisdom in verse 9. He says the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And we talked about how Rome is considered to be a city that's set on 7 hills. You can Google it. And it talks about the 7 hills. So it's also kind of the equivalent of Rome and the rise of the Roman Empire. And so then in verse 11, and the beast that was, verse 10, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip that. So there are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue for a short time. So you got to understand now, it's John that's seeing this vision. And so he says that these seven mountains, or these 7 heads, they also represent 7 kings. 5 of them have already fallen. So I take that to mean that in John's day, 5 of those kings had already come and gone. They had already fallen. And he says, and then 1 exists. Now, the one that exists at that time would have had to have been Rome, right? The ones that had fallen would have been Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and Greece. And so then the one that was Rome, which was ruling during that day. And he said, and then the other has not yet come. So this is going to be a final kingdom, a final king. And it says, and he must continue for a short time. And so this is going to be, it's looking forward to this final kingdom that's going to come at the end. And we're going to read Daniel chapter 2 in a minute, and it'll hopefully bring some of this together. So then verse 11. So the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, and is going to perdition. Now that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So the beast we know is the Antichrist. We've already established that. So he says that the Antichrist, and he calls him the beast that was and is not. It says he is the eighth, and he's of the seven, and he's also going to perdition. So we know that the beast is the Antichrist. He's condemned to perdition. He's condemned to go to hell. So we know that he's condemned to destruction. Now it says that he's the eighth king, but he's also one of the seven. Are you right? That's what it says, right? Are you staying with me here? So here's what we have. So this final king, or this final leader, this seventh one, which is the only one that had not yet come, is going to be the Antichrist. So it says that this seventh one is also the eighth. It doesn't make sense until you remember that when we studied the Antichrist, we talked about how he had a wound to his head as if he had been dead, and he came back alive. And so he's going to be a leader. He is going to appear to be killed. He is going to come back alive. And he is going to be the eighth. All right. And so that's the following of this. And I know, right? It's crazy. I know. But that's what he's trying to follow us through here. The 10 horns which you saw, and again, we already went over this. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom. They receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. They are of one mind. They will give their power and authority to the beast. So these will make war with the Lamb, with capital L, and the Lamb will overcome them because he's the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. And those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. So one of the things about this end time kingdom, and especially this end time religious system, they are going to make war against Christ. They're going to declare war against God. And they're going to declare war against God's people. But the Lamb overcomes them. I want to read something. This made a lot more sense in my mind when I was studying it for myself than it is when I'm trying to present it. I want to read to you Daniel chapter 2, which I think kind of reinforces all of this. So Daniel chapter 2 is when Nebuchadnezzar has that dream, and he has this dream of this image, right? And it's this big giant statue, and it starts out with gold, and as it goes down, the metals that it's made of become less and less. Let me see where I want to start it. I'm going to start in verse 29 of chapter 2. He says, "As for you, O king, thoughts came to your mind while you were on your bed about what would come to pass after this, and he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be." Verse 31, "You, O king, were watching, and behold, a great image, and this great image, whose splendor was excellent, stood before you, and its form was awesome. The image's head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. And you watched while a stone was cut without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them into pieces. And then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold were crushed together and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace was found of them. And that stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." So again, get this image. So he sees this great statue, head of gold, arms and chest of silver, thighs and abdomen of bronze, and then steel, and then the feet of clay and steel mixed together. And then he sees this great big giant rock. It says being hewn without hands. It's a great big giant stone being cut. And this stone completely crushes the entire statue, so much so that there's nothing of it left, and that only this rock fills the earth. All right, so that's where we're at. So, verse 36. So this is the dream, and now we will tell you the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory. Wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, has given them into your hand. He has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold. So Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, was the head of gold. But after you shall rise another kingdom, inferior to yours, and then a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And a fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. The iron that crushes the kingdom will break in pieces and crush all others. So he says, there's going to be other kingdoms arise after you. We know that Medo-Persian Empire is the ones that defeated Babylon, and then after them would have been Alexander the Great and Greece, and then probably a final one would have been Rome during that day, and then ultimately the final one is going to be this Antichrist kingdom. So whereas you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. In the days of these kings, so in the days of this final kingdom, and it's talking about it being iron and clay, it's going to be somewhat held together, but it's also going to be divided. It's not going to be as strong as it appears. So in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw the stone that was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So Daniel had a dream about the end time. And he had this dream that on this final Antichrist kingdom is when God is going to set up his kingdom. It was the kingdom of God that is this rock that's hewn without stone. It is the kingdom of God that crushes this entire statue. And it is the kingdom of God that is going to defeat this entire end time kingdom. Verse 14 says that they will make war, back over in Revelation 17, verse 14 says that they're going to make war with the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. And so what we're going to see as we look through the rest of this, in chapter 18, we're going to see, in this chapter, we're looking at the religious part of the kingdom. In chapter 18, we're going to see the political part of the kingdom. And then we're going to see them get defeated. The armies get defeated in chapter 19 and 20 is when God actually sets up his kingdom. So he's just, a lot of it looks at it in big, and then we go and we look at it little by little. So verse 16 and 17. So, and the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot and make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So, up in verse 2, it said that the kings of the earth actually committed fornication with her, that they were actually with her. They were a part of her. Down here in verse 16, it says, the 10 horns which you saw they're going to hate the harlot. They're going to make her desolate and naked, and they're going to eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And so this is the point that I was making, is that they are going to use this end time religious system for the first 3.5 years. And once they gain their power, once they gain their wealth, once they gain the following of the people, and this is really, I think, the critical part. Once they gain the following of the people through this religious system, they will completely destroy it. And that because the Antichrist himself is going to go into the temple in Jerusalem, and he is going to say, I am God. And he is going to set himself up to be worshiped as God. That's in Daniel, that's in Thessalonians, that's in Matthew 24 in the words of Jesus. And if you wanted to, you could Google the abomination of desolation. That is when the Antichrist goes into the Holy of Holies in the temple. He says, I'm God, and from here on out, you have to worship me. Well, he doesn't need her anymore. But what he needed the religion for was to galvanize the people, to get the people to follow him, to get the nations to follow him. And once he has that, he does them. You know, in some ways, what was it that Karl Marx said, that religion is what? Religion is the opiate of the people. You know, in some ways he's right, to be really honest with you, that people are going to worship something. And they're going to find, and it will galvanize people and unite them. And it's going to be used in the end time as a very key tool to unite the people and to unite the world leaders under this one political leader. Any questions? That was fun. I was really looking forward to teaching Revelation, and now I'm really looking forward to being done. All right. So again, I told you before that one of the things I had just never really picked up on was how similar a lot of this stuff was to what went on in Egypt. And the other thing I had never, ever, and again, this isn't in the Bible, it was just some extra research, but one of the things I had never run into ever before was even those ancient religions centered around a woman and a son, a woman and a son. And so somehow that end time Antichrist kingdom is going to have a woman and a son. I believe that. Obviously, it's not going to be Mary and Jesus. It's going to be idolatry. You know, we almost don't even see idolatry as being possible in our day. You know, to think of actually bowing down to some sort of statue or to a person, it just almost seems nobody today would do that. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. It's crazy. It's wild. Anything from the one guy who knew who Samaris was.
I thought everybody knew her.
Yeah.
How deep you want to go with it?
No.
All of the world religions, like you said, center around that. And if you put Nimrod in it, it's like another Holy Trinity.
Yeah.
Michelangelo's painting, The Creation of Man,
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of say that the man is actually Nimrod with his arm around Semiramis, with Tammuz, her arm over him. Michelangelo was known as a Gnostic.
Right. Right. Amen.